אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה.
Shabbat, Jesus, the Church, and the seventh day. Welcome back, my friends. This is the Temple Podcast, and I'm your host, Antonio Reed. Today, I want to explore something deceptively simple but theologically massive: the Shabbat, the Sabbath, and specifically, why Jesus, a Torah observant Jew, kept Shabbat on Saturday while most of Christianity keeps it on Sunday. This difference isn't a minor liturgical detail. It's a window into how Christianity developed after Jesus, often in ways Jesus himself would not have recognized. And let's dive in. Segment 1, Jesus was a Shabbat-keeping Jew. Before we can ask why Christians changed the Sabbath, we have to start with the obvious. Jesus was Jewish, not metaphorically, not symbolically, not culturally Jewish, but spiritually Christian. He was a Jewish rabbi living inside a thoroughly Jewish religious world. The Gospels consistently portray him attending synagogue every Shabbat. That wasn't optional, that wasn't symbolic, that was the commandment. Exodus 31:16-17 tells us, the Israelites are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating it for all generations as a lasting covenant. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever. This is a covenant, not a suggestion, not a spiritual metaphor, a covenant between the God of Israel and the children of Israel. So when we picture Jesus teaching in a synagogue on a Saturday morning, he's not doing something new. He's doing what every Jew was required to do. And here's the key point most Christians never wrestle with. Jesus never broke Shabbat. Jesus never abolished Shabbat. Jesus never moved Shabbat. When Christians say Jesus fulfilled the law, they often imagine that as canceling the law. But fulfillment in Hebrew thought means doing something correctly, not ending it. Jesus kept the Sabbath. The disciples kept the Sabbath. The early community around James, Peter, and John kept the Sabbath. So the real question is, where did Sunday come from? Segment 2, the Gentile problem. Let's talk about Gentiles, non-Jews. The Shabbat is a covenant commandment between God and Israel. There is no biblical command for Gentiles to observe the Sabbath. This is important. A Gentile follower of Jesus in the first century could worship the God of Israel without keeping Shabbat as a law. So the issue isn't whether Gentiles must keep the Sabbath, they don't. The issue is if Christians are followers of Christ and Christ kept the Shabbat on Saturday, why wouldn't they at least honor the day he honored? Even if you say Gentiles aren't obligated, the logic still feels intuitive. If I'm following the example of my Jewish rabbi, why wouldn't I align myself with his rhythm of sacred time? This is where Christianity begins to diverge from Jesus. Not because Jesus changed anything, but because the church redefined itself around a different identity. And that identity was increasingly Gentile. Segment 3, how Sunday slowly replaced Saturday. A common misconception is that Christians started worshiping on Sunday because Jesus resurrected on a Sunday. And that's actually not the historical cause. It's a later justification. Here's what really happened. 1, Gentile Christians didn't want to appear Jewish. In the Roman world, Judaism was tolerated, but Jewish customs, different story. Circumcision, dietary laws, Shabbat, and these were viewed with suspicion. As Christianity became increasingly Gentile, believers distanced themselves from Jewish identity for safety, for simplicity, and eventually for ideology. Second Roman society used Sunday as the day of the sun god. Sunday wasn't random. It already had religious significance in pagan Rome. Early Christian writers, especially in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, began connecting Jesus to the true sun, the light of the world, as a theological rebrand. They didn't hide it. It's all in the early sources. Third Constantine's 321 CE Sunday law. This is the turning point. In 321, Emperor Constantine newly aligned with Christianity, so declared, let all judges and all city people and all trades rest on the venerable day of the sun, not the Sabbath, not the seventh day, but the day of the sun. This law didn't make Sunday Christian. It made Christianity Roman. From this point on, church authority, like especially bishops in the Latin West, endorsed Sunday rest and increasingly discouraged the seventh-day Shabbat. Many Christian communities kept the Sabbath for centuries after the death of Jesus and the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. By the 4th century, some church councils were literally punishing Christians for Judaizing, which included keeping the Sabbath. And so the shift wasn't biblical. It wasn't commanded by Jesus. It wasn't commanded by Paul. It wasn't commanded by any apostle. It was cultural, political, and institutional, and ultimately imperial. Segment 4, the theological confusion. Now, here's what fascinates me. Christians say they follow Jesus, who the claim is the Christ, but Jesus kept Shabbat. The apostles kept Shabbat. The earliest congregations met on Shabbat. In Matthew 24:20, Jesus assumes his followers still keep Shabbat when he says, "Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath." And again, we see recognition of keeping the Shabbat in Luke 4:16, when we are told that Jesus kept Shabbat every week. He went to Nazareth, and on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. And finally, in Acts 13:14-15, we are also told that Paul preaches in synagogue on Shabbat. On the Sabbath, they entered the synagogue and sat down after the reading of the law and the prophets. Yet most Christians worship on Sunday. Why? The answer is almost always the same. Well, Jesus resurrected on Sunday. Okay, let's grant that for the sake of argument. The resurrection does not abolish the Shabbat commandment given at Sinai by who Christians recognize is God the Father. How can it be that the Son would have authority over the Father? If I were to accept how Christians identify Jesus as the Son of God, and there is no verse anywhere that says, because of the resurrection, the Sabbath is now Sunday. Nothing in the Gospels, nothing in Paul, nothing in Acts, and nothing in Revelation or in the entirety of the New Testament. The resurrection may have inspired early Christians to celebrate on Sunday, but that is different from moving the biblical Sabbath. Two separate categories: Resurrection Celebration Day, Biblical Covenant Day. Some Christians blur these categories because of centuries of tradition, but biblically, linguistically, historically, there's no way around it. The Shabbat is the seventh day, Saturday, and nothing in the New Testament changes that. Segment 5, should Gentile Christians keep Shabbat on Saturday? And now let me be precise here. According to the Torah, Gentiles are not required to keep Shabbat. It is a specific covenant sign between Israel and the God of Israel. So if a Christian says, I don't have to keep the Sabbath, biblically speaking, they're not wrong. They were never commanded to in the first place. But here's where the question becomes interesting. Or if a Christian says, I follow Jesus, and Jesus kept Shabbat on the seventh day, why would that Christian deliberately keep it on another day? At minimum, you would expect a follower of a Jewish rabbi to honor the sacred day their rabbi honored, not because of obligation, but because of alignment. If I love a tradition, like if I love a teacher, or if I want to walk in their footsteps, I don't reinvent their calendar, I join it. And yet most of Christianity flipped the calendar entirely, creating a spiritual world Jesus never lived in, taught in, or practiced. Segment 6, my reflection, a covenant of time. Shabbat is not merely a day of rest, it is sacred time, and it's the first holy thing in the entire Bible. Before a temple, before priests, before sacrifices, before Israel even exists, sacred time was created. And in Jewish tradition, ancient, medieval, and modern, the rhythm of sacred time is the heartbeat of the covenant. And what troubles troubles me is the casual way Christians talk about Sabbath without ever asking, what day did Jesus keep? Or what day did the apostles keep? What day does the Bible call holy? And if Christians truly claim to follow Jesus, why do they reinvent his most basic religious framework? Sunday observance, in the end, reflects the history of Christianity, not the teachings of Jesus. Interestingly enough, the Shabbat is a unique promise made and kept by God to the people of Israel. The Gentiles, including Christians, were never commanded to keep Shabbat. But if they want to celebrate it, even voluntarily, or the only day Shabbat exists is the seventh day, Saturday and not Sunday. The biblical rhythm doesn't change just because the church later changed its calendar. Closing thoughts. To me, this whole discussion highlights something larger about Christianity and Judaism. Christianity is a religion about Jesus. Judaism is the religion of Jesus, and the Shabbat is one of the clearest symbols of that divide. Jesus kept the Sabbath on Saturday, and the church, hundreds of years later, for political reasons, moved it to Sunday. And whether one is Jewish, Christian, or somewhere in between, the historical record speaks clearly. The Shabbat remains the seventh day, the same day it was in Genesis, the same day Jesus kept, the same day Jews keep today, and the same day it will always be. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend, leave a review, and tune in next time as we continue to explore the late Second Temple period, early Judaism, early Christianity, and everything that shaped the world of Jesus. I'm Antonio Reed. Shabbat Shalom.
Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva